How important is privacy to you? How would you feel if every time you walked into a coffee shop, someone followed you around with a microphone, recording your conversations and noting who you met with? How would that make you feel? Sounds invasive, right? Yet this is precisely what happens every time we go online. In this episode, we're diving deep into the world of digital freedom. Welcome, Pavel.
Well, thank you so much, Kathleen, for having me. I'm really excited to be doing this.
It's a pleasure having you. I'm so excited. I've been following the Tor Project for a while and really glad to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you.
So if I may ask you the first question, what is the common misconception about privacy technology?
One of the probably the most mentioned and really dangerous misconceptions about privacy technology is that it's only used for doing nefarious activity on the internet, or it's only used by people that have something to hide. And the truth is that it should be used and normalized just the same way that we have normalized privacy in day-to-day life, right? So when I go to a bank to withdraw some money, I have a reasonable expectation that nobody's standing behind me and checking out my PIN code that I enter. In fact, the entire architecture around the ATM is built so that it generates a certain level of privacy and that that you're shielded from onlookers. And that's the way that I think we should also be thinking about online privacy. Now, if you stick with the banking example, obviously we've made some great strides. Now, most people who do their online banking, whether it's on their phone or on their desktop computer, they see, the HTTPS, they see it's an encrypted connection. There's this reasonable expectation of privacy. Yet another aspect of our online activity, that gets a lot more murkier. And yeah, there's always this air of, why do you care so much about your privacy? Like, do you have something to hide? And the reality is, no, I have a reasonable expectation of privacy. It's a fundamental right. And I'm taking the necessary steps to protect myself with technologies such as Tor, for instance, right?
Right. I often have these discussions with friends and, well, I've done nothing. Often people say, I've done nothing wrong, so I got nothing to hide. I don't mind people looking over my private information, but it's not really about that, is it?
To a certain extent, it is about that. And I would argue that depending on your circumstance, in many ways, everybody has something to hide, because what you consider normal behavior today might not be normal behavior tomorrow and might as well be outlawed. I mean, especially in this particular moment. So I live in the US, and as of a couple of years ago in many states, for instance, accessing reproductive healthcare information online is penalized and criminalized. So something that should be as easy as researching information on the internet can now be used to create a case against you. So while people may think that they have nothing to hide, I don't think that this is the correct framing. Again, yes. I think we need to normalize the ability for people to make decisions about who they share information with. If you're meeting a friend at a crowded bar to talk about, I don't know, the date that you had last night, usually you lean in or you whisper a little bit. It's just this normal behavior in our day-to-day life where we're just trying to really take control of who we're sharing information with. And using privacy technology is just the same, except that it's online.
Right. That's very, very well said. I think it's becoming so important to have a certain level of privacy online. So if you can tell us a little bit about Tor and how does it work?
Tor, the fundamental level, hides a user's internet traffic. their location and their identity from the internet sites or the internet services that they're using. So in that way, it is similar to a VPN, but a little bit better. So it bundles up your traffic and routes it through a web tunnel, but it uses 3 hops. We call those relays, and these are run by volunteers. And that's where the added layer of security essentially comes in, because these relays aren't operated by the organization, by a single entity. If you think about a VPN, it's usually a for-profit company that has a very centralized server repository. So even though the traffic there too is encrypted, if somebody shows up at the VPN's office with a subpoena to try to access user data, in many countries that might be legal and the company might be forced to hand this over. Well, this is a scenario that can't really happen with Tor and the Tor network because it is decentralized and because of its nature that we don't own the whole part of your interaction. Even if somebody shows up at our door asking us for the data, we don't even have any data to begin with that we could hand over.
I see. So why, we kind of talked about this earlier, but why does online privacy matter, right? If you can kind of share a little bit more in depth about that. You kind of gave a really great example earlier.
I think, the example that I gave earlier is we're often dealing with worst case scenarios, especially here at Tor. This is why we have the very strong privacy and anonymity protections that we have. Because really, if you think about somebody experiencing domestic violence and trying to look up shelter or organize a way out of that relationship, or if you're looking at young people who are looking up LGBT or queer content and who want to protect themselves if they live in a country where queerness or transness is outlawed, those are, I think, some of the more pressing use cases. But even if we're thinking about the Western world and a lot of socioeconomic trends that we're seeing, workers organizing at work to talk about the working conditions that they face, basically every aspect of our social, professional lives is now either facilitated or completely carried out online. And this is why online privacy matters. Once our life happens online, we need to make sure that we have the same protections in place for our identity, for our private thoughts. And then I think the other big aspect of that is that in many cases, it is only through those privacy protections, through the ability to shield where your true location is or what your identity is, that you're actually being able to access content that might be relevant or necessary to you. With the way that the internet ecosystem is built, I mean, you were talking about it, right? Like it's a surveillance capitalist model that is designed to basically benefit off of your data. It is designed to harvest your attention. Now, that means you're likely only going to be displayed content that kind of matches your profile and matches the things that you're interested in to keep you engaged as long as possible. But that might also mean that you miss crucial other pieces of information, other people's opinions. And so adding that layer of privacy through, anonymity protections gives you at least a chance of having a little bit more of an unfiltered, unbiased way of engaging with the world.
That is so true, because now with music, as well as all different kinds of content, you only get things you have, in the past that you've liked, but there's no new information, it seems like it's very isolated in a sense.
Absolutely. I mean, people have used the word echo chamber, and I think this is in many ways true. Yeah. And so really, if you're using, especially, let's say, Tor browser, which gives you access to the Tor network, because your identity is anonymized to a really high degree, especially the more people that use it, you can see a version of the internet, I think, that gives you pause and where you're like, oh, I didn't see that article. I would have never seen that article. So I generally encourage everybody to try it out.
Thank you. Can you share a story? Because now we so people who are curious, first time learning about Tor, Can you share a story, say a use case or a story where Tor made a real difference in someone's life?
Yeah, I mean, apart from, the small moments that we talked about, whether it's, in your workplace or, communicating with friends and acquaintances or just accessing information, that one story that sticks with me the most is one of our younger users, a teenager named Nadia, who lives in a country where the government essentially heavily controls access to the internet and the information that are presented to its citizens, specifically with the goal, to retain authoritarian power. And so in these cases, I think VPNs, it would be a go-to tool for a lot of users. But unfortunately, in her country particularly, they have been outlawed. So any sort of encrypted technology basically has been banned. And so for her, Tor is really one of the only ways to kind of communicate with the outside world. Because as a young person, a lot of her life revolves around the ability to connect with friends over the internet, the ability to do her homework with a computer and using the internet. So that's one of moments where I really realize, especially with younger generation and their reliance on digital services, the difference that Tor can really make to restore a sense of normalcy.
You mentioned decentralization earlier, like having different places, different people running different nodes, different running the Tor network.
Mm-hmm.
How does that decentralization change the way users control their data?
I mean, what it does is it essentially restores the power dynamic of you being in control with whom you share what information, right? So as a user, so your ability to really have a way to access the internet safely, anonymously, securely with the Tor browser that takes advantage of the Tor network, that I think brings back a little bit of the normalcy that we're used to with our privacy expectations in real life and transports them into the digital universe. Now, from the way that we operate as an organization, that is the difference between any other for-profit entity, because we do not have a for-profit motivation. We do not collect your data. We do not capitalize on it, which means we're really just providing you with the service of staying connected to other people. And it is done through a like-minded community of volunteers, right? These relays, these nodes that we were talking about that make up the Tor network are volunteer operated and volunteer run. So it's people who have similar beliefs certainly to myself, and I'm assuming you're very interested in privacy also to yourself. So it's really people like you and I who are supporting this ability, and people who might not have the technical skills to run relays, who donate to our cause so that we can help maintain operations. But yeah, I think the fact that there is no single entity, that we cannot be compelled to reveal user data because we don't collect it, because it is fully encrypted, and because there is no single point of entry. I think for Star Wars fans, I think the Death Star is really the great analogy. I think one of your guests has said this in a previous episode, but there is no single point of failure with us, and that really makes all the difference.
Yes. I actually heard it from when in a blockchain space at a talk.
Okay.
Someone was describing about no single point of failure, and Death Star was used as an example, which I think it's perfect analogy. And I really love what you said about, real life interaction versus online, because these days we engage more and more online, and it almost feels like if we choose not to engage, it feels really lonely sometimes. It feels like there's a community missing, there's big missing piece in life. But when we do engage, it feels like we're going up to stage, like what you said earlier about, it feels like we're going on stage and using a microphone and just announcing what's happening in our life, which is, it feels very daunting. And I think having such a privacy tool helps a lot. isn't it?
Yeah. And really, I think we've potentially, I mean, maybe there's a discussion in there to be had, but I think also big tech companies have conditioned us to normalize laying ourselves bare, like looking at the whole influencer community, right? And the way that we're presented with both alleged real life content or even scripted content, it is so heavily geared around the way that we've normalized online interactions. And I think that is by design to kind of lower our resistance, because the truth is that the internet economy, I don't think it would completely fall apart, but it would have to come up with a different way of monetizing these spaces. And it would certainly not be as excessive as it is if there are more safeguards for individual users in there.
Looking back, Tor has been around for a long time. Looking back, I think past 2 decades, what's been Tor's biggest impact?
I think the biggest impact really is that it's still around in many ways. The last 25 years, especially if you're looking at geopolitics, have been certainly a roller coaster ride. And the track record is really hard to summarize because there's so many different pieces. But I think some of the standout moments, and that might be familiar to everyday listeners and internet users, are the Snowden revelations. So Edward Snowden actually used Tor to transmit the data in Tor-based applications to ultimately reveal the mass surveillance conducted by the U.S. government on its citizens and also global citizens. But a major political event before that was the Arab Spring. And that was actually a pivotal moment in the way that also Tor understood the full potential of its technology. Because when it was originally developed as a means to just securely communicate and exchange files with the ability that nobody can actually see the contents of any message, it quickly became clear that in the advent of repressive governments understanding that cutting off access to the internet is the best way to either restore, control, or claim power, the anonymizing and privacy-preserving properties of Tor technology showed us that it has a great anti-censorship potential. And so that also set us on the track of really looking at how to develop anti-censorship technologies. And one of our famous solution services is called Snowflake, and that reappeared only 11 years later, again in Iran, actually, at that time, during the Masa Amini protests, and allowing people to circumvent internet censorship and basically continue to use social media and inform the world about what was going on. You know, take videos, take pictures, post them to social, and give the rest of the world a window into what was going on in Iran at that time. And so I think as far as the storied history of Tor goes, it's been there for a number of major moments. But overall, I think the biggest impact is really continuing to be there for the small events in people's lives, right? Again, the coworkers who are trying to organize and unionize and need secure communications, the teenager who is having questions about their sexuality and doesn't want to splash this all over the internet or share that with their internet service provider, parents, you know, looking up parenting advice without being on somebody's list as bad parents, right? Like just the reclaiming of privacy, it gets more and more important. And I think the biggest impact is we're still here, we're still doing it, we're still serving millions of users daily.
I think the value and the contribution that the Tor project and other privacy technologies are often overlooked. It's such an important piece of someone's life because you basically give them a sense of security when it's needed the most. And you're a nonprofit, right? It's just incredible how I respect, privacy technology companies so much, especially nonprofit.
I mean, I guess it's almost poetic in the sense that, yes, if you're offering anonymizing, privacy-preserving technology, maybe the best way is to fly under the radar. I don't know. Maybe we would not be good at our mission if we were more prominent. Who knows?
Right.
Who's to say?
So tell us a little bit about yourself. What made you want to work for privacy technology? organization?
Yeah, so I mean, I I started my professional career really at a moment in time where it was really the rise of Facebook and a bunch of other tech startups. And quite serendipitously, I found myself when I was first starting to work in communications for a lot of these tech companies. And there was always this talk about how privacy is so important, privacy is so important. But once you started peeling back the layers, you really saw that there wasn't really much to that these companies were doing in order to preserve privacy. And like you said in your intro, right? I mean, essentially, once these companies became so big, they realized that the best way to make money um, is to use and abuse that data that they were collecting on people. So at a certain point, I think I just reached my breaking point there, because in many ways it also reminded me of experiences that my parents' generation went through. So I was born in East Germany, and my parents were basically under constant government surveillance back in the day, back in the 80s. And at some point in the 2000s, those files were released. I never look at that. I don't think my parents ever looked at it. But it was around the same time that these two things converged, like kind of the coming to terms with the storied history that I, as a German native, had, plus now working for these companies where we're almost volunteering the surveillance. Now, instead of having some sort of government actor spying on every activity, we're actually opening it up for ourselves and outsourcing it to these big tech companies. And I think something just clicked in me, and I was like, I have to pivot. And so when the opening at Tor presented itself to me a couple of years ago, that was when I was like, this must be it. This must be a sign.
Mm. And I think in the pre-discussion, you also mentioned a book about a really important book that changed the way
My
you
God,
think about.
yes. Yeah, it's so weird. I mean, like, yeah, I'm expecting a lot of privacy conscious people listening to this potentially. And yeah, I mean, the Bible in this space is Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff. I don't know when I first read it, but I definitely reread it during COVID in 2020, which was obviously also like a pivotal moment globally. But that was also the moment where now even more aspects of our day-to-day life were so heavily dependent on the internet. By that time, I had already moved to the US, and it just really changed the way that I thought about technology even more. I mean, the more you learn about technology, the more concerning you can become. At least there's the potential there. I am in no means anti-technology. I use it every day. I love it. And I guess because I love it so much is why I decided to work for an organization that tries to present an alternative model of the internet and the way that we engage with digital services that help us restore a little bit of the day-to-day privacy expectations that we've normalized in our offline lives, and it's just bringing them online.
Thank you. How do you make Tor easier to use while keeping it secure? I think a lot of these privacy tools, they seem quite complicated. I think not to even mention coming from the blockchain space. It's very, very complicated. It's you almost have to take a college course to be able to use some of the tools available. So how does Tor Project kind of overcome that?
I was going to say, like, in that case, I have really, really good news for you. Tor is actually really easy to use because it is just as simple as downloading the Tor browser, opening it up, and using it like you would with any other browser. Most people are probably familiar with Safari, Chrome, or Edge, or Mozilla. And in fact, Tor browser is just, one step over. So I always encourage everybody to just download it and take a look, especially over the last couple of years. We've done a lot of work on the user experience with a focus on also making it much more accessible, making it compatible with screen readers and just other visual improvements that align it more, I think, with what users are already used to. And I can guarantee you, if you use the browser for day-to-day activity or in your professional life, you will find great value and ease of use. Maybe that is also one of the misconceptions about privacy technology, right? That we need to do away with, that it is in fact not difficult to use. I think a lot of people who are using VPNs, for instance, right? I mean, they have gotten used to some of the challenges that come with it in terms of performance, right? Sometimes like you have a really slow connection. Well, so what? You just restart it or you build a new circuit. And that's kind of the same with Tor. Sometimes, yes, you have a slow connection. Yeah, because your traffic gets bounced through like 3 different steps and encrypted along the way.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? It's not a problem. Just refresh it and chances are you have a stronger connection. So I think that is really the good news here. It's super easy to use. And the security, we've talked about decentralization before, comes from that open source distributed nature.
Mm-hmm.
Because our code base is visible to everybody. Everybody can independently audit it and verify it and make sure that it does what it does. You don't have to take our word to, understand that this is private. If you want to take a look at how Tor is built, you can, and you will see that it is secure. And in fact, thanks to hundreds or thousands of global volunteers, we're getting bug reports, code audits all the time. And we have a really fast release cycle where we're incorporating all these changes and all this feedback and making it more secure. There's just really no way that we can hide what we're doing as opposed to, let's say, a for-profit company who might learn of a certain vulnerability, but could potentially choose to not disclose it in time because it would cause extreme financial hardship for them or some sort of financial losses. Since that's not our business model, we have no incentive to hide this from anybody. Quite the opposite. Our main goal is to keep it secure, and that is achieved with help and feedback, bug reporting from our community, distributed, decentralized nature, because the more relays we have all over the world, the easier it gets to hide somebody's internet traffic because it gets so much harder to pinpoint where somebody's coming from and going to.
Mm-hmm. We're now in a very turbulent times, and especially when it comes to privacy. What some of the privacy challenges do you see coming in the next couple of years?
I love your description of turbulent times. I remember in school, we had to read all these dystopian novels like, Brave New Worlds and 1984 that were all about, groupthink, mind control, and how being stripped of proper access to information can create these dystopian worlds. In no way am I comparing the current moment to fiction, but I think we certainly need to stay attentive and notice the trends and pay attention to the trends and form some sort of resistance. So I think the main challenge is to continue to be vigilant about, again, with whom you share information. Now more so than ever, I live in the US. It's becoming increasingly more difficult to make sure that you're saying and doing the things that align somehow with this administration's values without putting a target on your back. If you do otherwise, that's by design. And I don't subscribe to this. So I think we need to continue to protest, to visibly speak up, to loudly speak up, and just, be vocal about some of the injustices that we're seeing, and especially the abuses of power. Now, bringing it back to the digital space, I think one of the major privacy challenges that we're going to see in the next couple of years is the continued push to build backdoors into encryption, which would essentially break encryption. Just in the last couple of weeks, we've actually seen the UK targeting Apple, which is arguably probably the largest tech company in the world, with an appeal or a push to allow the UK government access to user data. And the truth is, there is no way to do it just once or for just one use case. If you break encryption once, you break it forever and for all. And so that is one of the biggest privacy challenges. Everybody who is in this space, whether it's for-profit, non-profit companies, but also the people using it, and depending on the privacy protections that encryption offers, we need to continue to stay vigilant. And so Tor is doing a variety of things, including talking to policy and lawmakers about the consequences of breaking encryption, talking about the beneficial use cases of encryption, providing alternative ways of framing the encryption debate. And then we're also gearing up to prepare for post-quantum computing.
That is going to be a very, very challenging
Yeah.
development. How are you doing that? Actually, I'm curious because blockchain is also very, very close. Quantum computing is going to also affect blockchain encryption.
Yeah. So we're currently looking at various research designs, and we actually also have prototyped some implementations. Our main goal is to get it off the ground quickly. Obviously, as a nonprofit, we do have some resource restrictions in our ability to dedicate development capacity to it. So I'm putting it out to your users. If there's anybody out there who has the ability and the desire to help out financially by sponsoring this project, please reach out to us because we're actively looking for grants and funders who are helping with this. But yeah, the goal is essentially to upgrade our cryptographic mechanisms so that they can withstand post-quantum computing capabilities of decryption. And there is a certain urgency here, specifically with the way that people could start storing data now just to try to decrypt it later. So it's a little bit a race against time.
I see. Speaking about funding, being a nonprofit, how and where do you find funding? Is this a donation or?
Yeah, so by far our biggest group of contributors and donations is individual donations, individual giving. So people who either give on a monthly basis or once a year, depending on, their abilities and the capabilities. But the fact that this is currently our biggest pot of contributions is really speaking to this moment in time where I think a lot of people are really trying to take active control of their user data and their privacy online, and who are getting more and more tuned into the options that are out there other than, let's say, popular for-profit companies like VPNs. And we're really subscribing to the model that Tor offers. And I would encourage everybody in this subscription economy, right, where we have, I think, upwards of 10 subscriptions a month. Like, as you're auditing whether you really need 7 different streaming services, as you're cutting one of them, maybe to allocate these $5, $10, or $15 a month to, a monthly donation to Tor. And then the other funding sources are government grants, partnerships with other companies and like-minded organizations. So it's really a variety of funding from all over the world. We have a lot of funding sources in Europe, and certainly over the last couple of years, heavily diversified globally.
I guess with the corporate sponsorship, would that do you accept corporate sponsorship? Because I imagine that some corporations would want to be be seen as supporting privacy tools.
Absolutely. Yeah, and one of the examples is, for instance, a Molvad. We launched the Molvad browser that offers similar protections to the Tor browser, except that it doesn't utilize the Tor network, but you can pair it with a VPN. And so we do have also partnerships like this, just like I said, with the post-quantum project that we're kickstarting. If there's a taker for that out there, we're definitely open. So we're really looking for funding all over and are open to very different models. The most important aspect is, to your point, that they align with our values, that they align with the principles, and that even when there's corporate funding involved, that they understand that as far as Tor is concerned, we don't have a for-profit motivation. So we do everything out in the open. When we release something, it is open source. It can be used by everybody else. And there's really public merit to everything that we do. But that said, it is one of those foundational technologies that is used by a lot of for-profit entities. So investing in this also creates this positive feedback loop ultimately. But if you're just thinking about the blockchain space, for instance, 60% of Bitcoin nodes run on Tor's Onion services. So, just because our technology is, in our case, as we develop it, not for profit, we make it available to the public through its open source nature, and then people can use it for their enterprises.
It didn't occur to me before, but this corporate social responsibility and our kind of as individual, our responsibility for the society as well. It's really kind of important to have that infrastructure, privacy infrastructure in place, isn't it? And we often don't really think about it because we assume it's there, but things have changed so much, our lives and how we engage online. So really, I feel what the Tor project's doing is so important. Yeah. Anything else we haven't discussed that you think it's important to mention?
I think really maybe the most important thing is to understand that as an end user, you have an option that is not costing you money to secure your privacy and your anonymity in order for you to do the things that you need to do online with the peace of mind that it cannot be abused by anybody else, whether it is for financial gain or to target you. And that's, I hope, what people take away from this whole discussion, that really privacy is a human right, and that you need to demand the same privacy protections that we're experiencing and witnessing in real life for all of your online interactions. And then maybe, just because I feel like I've dunked on VPN so much, like I've in no way saying that VPNs are bad, quite the opposite. Like we're a big believer in a lot of the messaging that comes out there because VPNs arguably have probably contributed to raising the awareness of the importance of privacy. And sometimes even when I'm watching YouTube or whatever, and it's I see these goofy VPN ads that mostly ride on the messaging of spoofing your internet service provider so that you can access another streaming service. There is a kernel of truth in there that also applies to Tor, because ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to make your internet service provider, you're trying to make your country think that you're somewhere else, so in order that you have access to different content. And that's really what we're also trying to accomplish, but not just on the entertainment scale, but really on a global scale, to provide people, especially in parts of the world where they don't have access to unbiased, unfiltered information, to be able to gain that access or regain that access.
Thank you. And for those listeners who are now interested in finding out Tor, I guess they can go to the browser and read more about Tor.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think the main thing that I always say that people should do is visit download.torproject.org and download the browser. Give it a spin. You'd be surprised how seamless the transition is. And then if you are a person who wants to support our cause, obviously donations is one way. But if you don't have money, there are also non-monetary ways that people can support. I've mentioned Snowflake, our anti-censorship technology. It actually works as easy as opening a tab on your browser. And I know I have way too many tabs open already. So I challenge everybody who is listening to this and probably also has 20, 30, or 100 browser tabs open. Just add another one to it, but run a Snowflake proxy on it. And that will help give some of your internet bandwidth to an internet user in a part of the world that needs it to circumvent censorship or access a news site. It helps support our network. It gives a little bit of bandwidth to our network, which increases the performance for everybody, and also helps scramble the traffic even more.
That feels so wonderful because it feels like we're all one, kind of helping each other on this planet Earth.
We're calling it hide in the crowd approach. And the more people opt for privacy, the easier it is for people who really rely on that privacy to protect their physical well-being to disappear. And at the end of the day, the more people use it, the more normal it becomes. And it helps our advocacy in the long run.
Thank you. Thank you, Pavel. Thanks so much for your time today, your insights.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to what Progress Reimagined is coming up with. I know we're doing our part, and so are you. So I'm really glad to have had the opportunity to share so much detail about Tor and its history.
Thank you. Once upon a time, privacy simply meant closing your curtains. Today, with every click and search being tracked, privacy means so much more. Tor isn't just simply a privacy software. They provide lifelines to our digital freedom. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider supporting the Tor project. Links are in the show notes. Kathleen Chu, this has been Progressing Reimagined. Join us next time as we continue to explore innovative ideas, technologies, and emerging economic models that put humanity and our planet first.